This is the Emmy Award-winning 11 News Close-Up with your host, Marvin Scott.
Good morning. This morning's guest is the ranking Republican member of the House Homeland Security Committee, and he sits on the Select Committee on Intelligence. Congressman Peter King, now serving his 9th term, is a strong supporter of the war against international terrorism, and he was a leader in the effort to secure more federal funding to protect New York against any potential nuclear dirty bomb attacks. Additionally, he's up for re-election in a year. Republicans hope to shift the balance of power in Washington. We'll hear about that as well, but let's begin first. Welcome to PIX News Close-Up.
Great to be back. Good to be here.
And let's talk about the terror threat.
Sure.
You're on the Intelligence Committee. You're filled in as much as you can. Share with us, where do we stand on that threat? Is it still a very active one?
Yeah, we're still very concerned about it. It's a threat we learned about several months ago. A very good source. Someone was captured, and through interrogations, information has come out about what appears to be a series of attacks planned against Europe. There's no evidence right now of it coming to the United States, but any time we're talking about an attack in Europe, the United States could always be attacked as well. So we have to be on alert over here. But the threat, it's being confirmed by other sources, so it's being taken very, very seriously.
Now, are the targets civilians? Are they American civilians they're going after at these foreign targets?
No, there's no specific evidence that they're going after American civilians, but what we believe they will be going after will be similar to what was done in Mumbai in India, where large numbers of both locals and tourists would congregate, a hotel, a museum, a train station, outside an airport, an historic landmark in the country, and that's why Americans were put on notice to be very alert and aware that something could be happening. If you see something, say something.
Just before we began taping this program, there was word that a German al-Qaeda operative was being interrogated at Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan and has provided additional information, and they're now trying to track down 45 other people who may be involved in this plot. Any information on that?
Well, there have been news reports, and I'll just leave it at that a person called Siddiqui, who is a German citizen of Afghan descent, was captured in July this summer, that he's being interrogated at Bagram, and he is the main source for the information that's coming out. Those are press reports, and there's no reason not to believe them. Now, as far as the other arrests, those stories are coming out each day. Some are valid, some aren't, but whether or not the specific story is valid about this 45 or those 5 or this 10, the fact is there are a number of people that authorities are looking for, not just in Germany, but also in other countries. You may have read in the last several days that the French authorities have been making arrests. The British have elevated their threat level. So the countries that seem most concerned are Britain, the French, the Germans, also perhaps Denmark. So these are serious attacks, and we've seen attacks in recent years in London, in Madrid, and it's a lot easier for them to attack Europe than it is the United States. Having said that, we have to be very, very careful over here. We can be very thankful in New York that the NYPD is the best in the world, is on a constant state of high alert. But even now, it's even more intense.
Now, this was only announced a week ago, but you've been tracking this since midsummer. What is it that ratcheted up the alert level? Was it the statements made last week by Osama bin Laden or other information?
It could be any number of reasons. One is information was starting to leak out from the European media, from European sources. And when that happens, I think it's important for the American government to try to put it in some kind of context and acknowledge, yes, we do know about possible threats. We are as alert as we can be, and we want Americans to know about it. Otherwise, you can have rumors running rampant and panic setting in. But no, there have been, again, a series of arrests are being made in different countries, and then bin Laden did put out the audio tape last week, and in the past there's been concern that tapes from bin Laden contain a message or a signal or a trigger to his forces out there to begin the attack.
By making this known worldwide with this announcement, does that have an impact of diminishing the threat by letting them know that we know, or does it only intensify their determination to pull it off?
We don't know for certain, but the conventional wisdom is that it can throw them off guard. That the terrorists want everything to be exactly the way they planned it to be, and if anything goes wrong, there's a belief that they go back, if not to start, at least they go back and they begin parts of it over again. So yeah, it can disrupt them. We don't know that for certain, but that seems to be the conventional psychological wisdom on the mind of the al-Qaeda terrorists. That yes, once they feel it's out there, that then they back off for a bit and they sort of replan at least parts of it.
In recent days, we've stepped up our drone attacks against al-Qaeda targets and al-Qaeda operatives. Can we expect more of that, and how successful can you tell us that they have been?
Well, the official position of the American government and members of the Intelligence Committee is we don't confirm or deny whether or not drone attacks are taking place. That is the official position of our government. However, it's clear from news reports that there's been a lot of attacks taking place, that the Obama administration, I give them credit for it, is stepping up activity on the Pakistan side of the border. This began in the last 6 to 8 months of the Bush administration. It's really intensified under President Obama, and I give him full credit for doing that. And I think you've seen the attacks of whatever type they are being intensified over the last several weeks in the areas where we think the training camps may be for this type of attack.
Congressman, a question I ask, and I'm sure you and your colleagues ask as well. Billions and billions of dollars are spent each year on intelligence in this country, and we have a worldwide effort. Why? Why can't we find Osama bin Laden?
Yeah, it is hard to explain. Having said that, whenever I meet with the intelligence officials, from the head of the CIA to the head of National Counterterrorism Center, FBI, all of them, and also ask our foreign allies, basically, I mean, and you're probably going to Afghanistan yourself in the next several months. When you go there, you see how expansive it is. The mountains go on for hundreds and hundreds of miles. And the presumption is he's in one of those caves on the Afghan side of the border or the Pakistan side of the border. Much of this is no man's land as far as anyone who's not part of al-Qaeda. The Pakistan army has no access there. Pakistan officials don't. Afghan officials don't. And that's really the only, and also the only way we're going to get bin Laden is if somebody on the inside tips us off, or if we are lucky enough to intercept something. But he stopped using cell phones. It's very, very difficult to find them. But you would have thought after all these years, but I can assure you under President Bush and under President Obama, a full-scale effort has been made. Remember when we had the abortion clinic bomber down south, I guess 10, 15 years ago now. It took years to capture him, and that was in our own country. He was in the mountains, I guess, in Tennessee, I think it was. Yeah, I guess it was Tennessee. Yeah. But in any event, so it's very difficult. But again, I don't think back on September 12th, 2001, we thought it would take this long to get bin Laden.
Okay, I want to talk about the terror trials here in New York and also the conviction this past week of Faisal Shahzad. You had some very strong comments about him. Rather than starting that now, let's take a break and we'll pick up on that when Pick's News Close-Up continues. Back with Congressman Peter King, the ranking Republican on the House Homeland Security Committee. You've had so much to say about civilian trials for suspected terrorists. And this week, you came under criticism while you were criticizing the Faisal Shahzad conviction, sentenced to life. This is the man who had hoped to bomb and blow up Times Square. And you were under criticism by law enforcement because you said there was some luck here and some other comments.
Yeah, well, first of all, it was described in the newspapers being law enforcement. I don't know of anyone in law enforcement who disagrees with what I said. What I said was that it was luck because when he was captured, and it was great police work by the FBI, the NYPD, Joint Terrorism Task Force, did a great job in capturing him. But because of orders of the Attorney General, law enforcement had to advise him of his Miranda rights, which meant that he could stop talking at any time. Fortunately, and this was the luck, he kept talking anyway. Now, if he had been smart and if he had just kept his mouth shut, we wouldn't have been able to get any information out of him. And my concern in these terrorist cases is it's not so much the person you captured, but it's the information he would have. They could have been part of a larger conspiracy. For all we knew at the time there were 3 or 4 other bombers who were going to be striking other parts of New York or other parts of the Northeast. And if he had that information and we gave him his Miranda rights, he doesn't talk, well, then we wouldn't have found that out. The same thing that happened with the Christmas Day bomber. So I believe that when it comes to terrorist cases, we have to have exceptions to the Miranda rule. We have to treat them much more as enemy combatants than we do as ordinary civilians who were captured. And he was, as far as I'm concerned, he was an agent of a foreign army, a foreign terrorist group that was here in this country. Like, for instance, when the Nazi saboteurs came into Long Island during World War II, Franklin Roosevelt had them executed within several months. Nobody ever saw them. Nobody even knew about them until it was all over as to what happened to them. So in time of war, we do have the right to put people into military tribunals, and that's what I'm saying should have happened here. And I would say whoever that source was who called himself a law enforcement source, every police officer and FBI agent I've spoken to agrees with me that we should not have given him his Miranda rights, and it's going to create real problems in the future.
You're saying suspected terrorists should not have constitutional rights?
Should not have Miranda warnings, no. They should be subject to a separate body of law, as in the military tribunals, because when Shahzad is captured or another terrorist is captured, the information we're trying to get from him is not to get a criminal conviction of him in the future, but to head off another attack. I use the example of we had captured Muhammad Atta on September 10th, and we knew that there were other plots out there besides his. Should we say to Muhammad Atta, you have the right to remain silent, or do we try to get as much information out of him as we can to head off the other two planes?
Now, Faisal Shahzad was in an American court right here in New York, and there's much controversy whether we should hold these trials, whether they should be military tribunals. You have been quite outspoken about it. You believe there should be the military tribunals and not in civilian courts, particularly not here in New York.
Right.
Now, the future of terror trials have been thrown into doubt this week when a federal judge, Lewis Kaplan, barred testimony of a prosecution's key witness in a terror trial because they claim that witness was coerced under CIA interrogation. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, actually, it's even one step removed from that. They claim that the defendant was coerced, and when he was coerced, he gave them the name of this witness, Abibi, who is willing to testify voluntarily. He was never coerced. The witness himself was never coerced.
It was the defendant.
The defendant, they claim, who was coerced by the CIA, not even by the FBI. And as a result of that, the judge is going to exclude the testimony of a person who was not coerced. And this is the danger we face when we go into a civilian court. Gayani was a master terrorist involved in the African embassy bombings. He then became a personal bodyguard to bin Laden. He was purchasing explosives, and yet we can't use his own statements against him, even though I think we should be able to, because even if he were coerced by the CIA, which I don't believe he was, but even if he was not coerced by the FBI when he testified to them, and certainly the witness, Abibi, was never coerced. So I think if we had a military tribunal with a military judge, he could use a common sense factor and say that we can use this evidence against Gayani. As a result, now, I don't know what's going to happen to this case, because the key evidence against him was the evidence of this witness who is now going to be excluded. Ironically, the judge said, well, this isn't necessarily that serious because Gayani can be held anyway as an enemy combatant, which I've never heard a judge say, I'm holding out the evidence in this case, but you can hold them forever anyway, which, or at least till the end of the war, which could go on another 20 or 30 years.
But his decision is not binding on other judges, so other judges could rule differently here.
Well, this is the risk we face, though. I think, I've been to Guantanamo. I think we have the courtroom, the facilities there. We can have a military tribunal, have the trial there.
This brings up, what about Sheikh Khalid Mohammed? We still haven't got a decision where that trial is going to be, and that's touched off a whole flurry of controversy, whether he should be tried here in New York or not. He is the one who is the self-proclaimed mastermind of 9/11, right, and the administration has not yet made a decision.
Yeah, the administration made a decision, backed away, and now they can't make another decision. Last November 9th, I believe it was, Eric Holder, the Attorney General, said that the trial of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed would be held in Lower Manhattan. Then in February, they said they were reconsidering, and they have not made a decision. If they're waiting until after the election, this is wrong. The American people should know where this trial is going to be, whether it's going to be a civilian trial or a military trial, whether it's going to be in New York or Peoria or Milwaukee or Los Angeles, or where they intend to hold it. To me, this clearly belongs in a military tribunal. It belongs in Guantanamo. It never belongs in New York City. What this is going to cost is hundreds of $millions in security. It's going to cut off almost all of Lower Manhattan. Areas such as Chinatown, I think, are going to go out of business. Residents living in that area are going to be subjected almost to martial law. And that's how bad this is going to be.
Well, it was proposed that they use a prison out in Thompson, Illinois.
Right.
And my understanding is that the Republicans have stymied the efforts. The federal government wanted to buy that prison,
right,
have this trial in some remote location. Why have the Republicans been so opposed to that?
Because I don't believe these trials should be held on the mainland at all. They should not be held in civilian courts. They should be held in a military tribunal, and the ideal place for that is Guantanamo. If it doesn't belong in New York, the people of Thompson, Illinois shouldn't have to put up with it either. And I just think it's wrong to set the precedent of putting the mastermind, the evil architect of September 11th, to allow him to get full constitutional rights in an American civilian court, and also to have it in New York. To go back to that, we are already the #1 target in the world, but to have Khalid Sheikh Mohammed on trial here, and that trial we won for years, would make just New York be clearly a target, and the risk of that is just ridiculous.